Why Machiavelli says hard work is your biggest mistake. We've been lied to, not by a villain with a sinister laugh, but by the smooth repetition of culture itself. Since childhood, we've been trained to believe in the sacredness of hard work, the grind, the hustle, the badge of honor that comes from sacrificing time, health, and sometimes even soul in the name of productivity. You've heard the phrases 1,000 times: hard work always pays off, no pain, no gain, rise and grind. But what if I told you that one of history's most brilliant political minds, Niccolo Machiavelli, would call all of this naive? Not only wrong, but strategically foolish. Machiavelli didn't believe that hard work was the path to power. He believed it was a trap, one designed to keep the masses toiling while the rulers play a different game entirely. A game of perception, leverage, and psychological warfare. Let's not get it twisted. Machiavelli wasn't lazy. He wasn't advocating for apathy or passivity, but he was obsessed with outcomes. And if something didn't lead to power, influence, or strategic survival, he questioned its utility. Hard work, in his view, was often a substitute for thinking smart, a distraction from mastering the hidden rules that govern success. In The Prince, he never once tells a leader to outwork his rivals in a physical sense. He says to outmaneuver them, outscheme them, or appear virtuous when necessary, but know when to break the rules. And that's the disturbing brilliance of Machiavelli. He forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Effort without strategy is a kind of self-betrayal.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
So why do so many people still cling to hard work like it's a moral virtue? Because it feels good. It feels just. There's dignity in sweat. There's control in action. But Machiavelli would say, feelings aren't results. You can feel honorable and still lose. You can grind 80 hours a week and still be manipulated by someone who understands timing, optics, and influence. The world, he reminds us, isn't a meritocracy. It's a theater. And the ones who win aren't always the ones who work the hardest. They're the ones who understand the script, the audience, and when to exit the stage. Think about how this applies to your own life. Have you ever worked tirelessly at a job only to be overlooked for a promotion? Have you ever poured your energy into a project while someone else took credit, or worse, used your momentum to rise above you? That's not bad luck. That's the system working as intended. Because the system doesn't reward effort, it rewards leverage, presence, timing. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. That's why he never told princes to earn loyalty through fairness. He told them to appear just while secretly acting in their own interests. Here's where it gets even deeper. Machiavelli's critique of hard work isn't just about politics or business, it's existential. He's asking us, what are you doing with your life energy? Are you mindlessly pouring it into routines and beliefs that make you feel productive but keep you powerless? Or are you directing it like a laser-focused, calculated, aimed at freedom? Because every day you wake up and blindly grind, you might be hardening your own chains. And yet people fear the alternative. They fear being called manipulative, cunning, or cold. But Machiavelli would say, do you want to be seen as good, or do you want to survive? This isn't about becoming immoral. It's about becoming effective. The ones who sit at the top of any hierarchy didn't get there by grinding harder than everyone else. They got there by understanding where to push, when to pull back, and who to play. It's a game of chess, not arm wrestling. Now let's be brutally honest. Most people don't want to think this way. They want the universe to be fair. They want karma to work like an accountant, tallying every sacrifice and paying out dividends of success. But Machiavelli says, life doesn't owe you anything for working hard. If you're not paying attention to the rules beneath the rules, you will be used no matter how noble your intentions. And that's the trap. We celebrate hard workers while secretly exploiting them. We admire their dedication while quietly betting on their blindness. Because those who work without strategy are predictable. And in Machiavelli's world, predictability is weakness. He teaches us to cultivate awareness instead of routine, leverage instead of labor, presence instead of exhaustion. So here's the haunting question. Are you working hard, or are you being used by those who understand something you don't? Because if you're not asking that, if you're not constantly examining the why behind your effort, you're not building a future. You're fueling someone else's. Machiavelli doesn't want you to stop working. He wants you to wake up. The power of perception. Why Machiavelli says being feared beats being exhausted. Let's be real, most people don't want to be feared. We're told from the time we're young that to be loved, admired, and respected is the key to everything. Be nice. Be agreeable. Work hard. Don't rock the boat. That's how you rise, they say. But Machiavelli would smirk at that. He'd tell you, being admired is pleasant, but being feared is effective. Because in the real world where people have competing interests, hidden motives, and power at stake, it is better to be strategically feared than universally liked. Exhaustion, he would argue, is the tax the powerless pay for trying to win the game with moral purity. But fear? Fear creates boundaries. It protects your time, your energy, your throne. In The Prince, Machiavelli drops the now infamous line, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." He wasn't writing this as a cold villain twirling his mustache. He was simply observing how the world really works, how people behave under pressure, how loyalty evaporates when it's no longer useful, how love is fickle, but fear is reliable. This doesn't mean you have to become a tyrant. It means you must understand the currency of perception. That the way people see you will either force them to respect your boundaries or invite them to cross them. Hard work alone won't protect you. You can grind endlessly and still be taken advantage of by those who know how to manipulate perception. If people don't respect you, if they don't sense a boundary, a steel wall, a capacity for retaliation, you become dispensable. Even worse, you become a tool. And Machiavelli's brutal clarity exposes this truth. Those who work without commanding respect are not admired, they are quietly exploited. They are kept around for what they can produce, not for what they mean in the larger structure of power. Now ask yourself this. In your job, your relationships, your community, are you admired for your character or tolerated for your utility? Are you working harder because people genuinely value you, or because you fear that if you slow down, you'll disappear? That's the terrifying part when you start to realize that hard work, without power, just builds someone else's empire. Machiavelli doesn't suggest cruelty. He suggests distance, detachment, a deliberate mystique. a sense of control over how others access you. Because those who are too available, too eager, too desperate to be liked, they drain themselves dry, trying to earn loyalty from people who would abandon them the moment it's convenient. But the ones who can walk away, the ones who project strength even in silence, those are the ones others calculate around. Ease and calculation, in Machiavellian terms, is better than affection. It lasts longer. Let's bring it down to something simple. Imagine two people in a room. One is cheerful, helpful, always working hard. The other is calm, controlled, maybe even a bit intimidating, not because they're rude, but because they say less, demand more, and seem like they don't need you. Who do people chase? Who do people second guess before disrespecting? It's not the harder worker. It's the one with gravity. Machiavelli knew this. He understood that the world doesn't respond to effort, it responds to weight. And weight comes from boundaries, not busyness. This is why he warned against relying too heavily on love or admiration. People admire you until they're jealous. They love you until they need a scapegoat. They support you until your presence threatens their own comfort. But fear, respect rooted in the sense that you're not easily messed with, that holds people accountable. It makes them hesitate. It builds a buffer around your time and your mind. So how do you cultivate this Machiavellian fear, not as a tyrant, but as a strategist? First, you control your presence. You don't explain everything. You don't justify your existence through effort alone. You act with intention. You say no often. You set standards others must rise to meet. You become selective with your time, your words, your access. And most importantly, you detach your identity from being liked. Because here's the painful truth: being liked is easy. It costs you nothing in the short term, but everything in the long run. Being respected, sometimes feared, that takes discipline. It means disappointing people. It means holding the line when others want you to cave. But Machiavelli would argue that the payoff is survival, influence, freedom. Hard work without respect is slavery. It is a treadmill disguised as a ladder. And if you're on it, working endlessly without authority or reverence, ask yourself who benefits most from your exhaustion. The harshest wisdom Machiavelli offers is also the most liberating. Stop playing by the rules of people who benefit from your obedience. Power is not in effort, it's in perception, in presence, in the ability to be both admired and, if necessary, feared. So the next time you're tempted to prove yourself by doing more, pause. Ask yourself if doing more will buy you freedom or just deeper chains. Effort is a distraction. Why strategy always beats struggle. We're told that struggle builds character, that pushing through pain somehow guarantees success, that the more we sweat, sacrifice, and suffer, the more likely we are to arrive at some imagined finish line. But Machiavelli dismantles that illusion with surgical precision. He didn't glorify struggle. He saw it for what it is, often just motion without direction. A clever trap, a socially accepted form of self-sabotage. Because while the masses pour their energy into effort, the few who understand strategy quietly pull the strings. Machiavelli's warning is clear. If you're struggling, you're probably being distracted from something more important, the real game, which is not won by effort, but by leverage or insight. and control of perception. Think about how many people you know who are constantly exhausted, working late, hustling multiple jobs, always busy. Yet nothing truly changes for them. They're respected for their work ethic but never promoted to power. They're admired for their reliability but rarely given autonomy. Why? Because they've fallen into the oldest trap in history, believing that effort alone creates elevation. But in Machiavellian terms, struggle is only useful if it's part of a larger design. If you're bleeding without strategy, you're not evolving, you're decaying. This doesn't mean effort is meaningless, but it has to be aligned. It has to be directed by a clear understanding of what actually moves power, attention, and influence. And in most of the modern world, that's not raw effort, it's leverage. It's knowing how to position yourself so that others invest in your survival. It's knowing what moves people emotionally, politically, and socially. It's not working harder than everyone else, it's learning how to make others need you more than you need them. Machiavelli knew that people romanticize struggle because it gives them a sense of moral superiority. Look how hard I'm trying, they say, as if effort is proof of virtue. But the truth is, no one pays you for effort. They pay you for results. And often, the people getting the biggest results are not the ones working the hardest, they're the ones working the smartest, choosing their battles, conserving their energy, and focusing on moments that shift the entire board with a single move. That's the Machiavellian model. That's the strategy of kings. We need to ask a brutal question. What part of our struggle is necessary? And what part is just addiction to motion? Are we actually building something? Or are we just proving that we can endure more pain than the next person? Machiavelli would argue that the obsession with effort is a way to avoid the discomfort of stillness, the kind of stillness that forces us to reflect, strategize, and confront the deeper power games around us. Because it's easier to keep our heads down and keep grinding than to stop and ask, why is the system built this way? Who profits from my exhaustion? What if everything I'm doing is making someone else stronger, not me? Strategy requires detachment. It demands that you step back from the struggle and see the map. Where is the power? Who holds influence? What does this system reward in reality, not in theory? And once you know that, you can begin to move with precision. You'll know when to push and when to pause, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to appear weak so others overreach, when to strike so others crumble. These are the subtle, quiet arts of power. You don't learn them by grinding, you learn them by observing. Here's the real mind twist. Many of the most successful people in the world don't struggle the way we imagine. Their days aren't chaos. They're focused, calculated. They've moved beyond constant effort into orchestration. And the only way they got there was by realizing that brute force is a primitive tool. At some point, the game becomes one of intelligence, not endurance. Machiavelli knew this in his bones. That's why he spent more time studying court politics and human behavior than physical labor. Because he understood the higher truth. When you master the terrain, you don't need to run. You simply place your feet where they matter most. So the question becomes, are you trying to win by lifting heavier stones, or are you learning how to move the fulcrum? If you're struggling without progress, you're not broken. You're misaligned. And once you shift from effort to strategy, from endless struggle to targeted strikes, everything begins to change. Not because the world got easier, but because you finally stopped playing by the rules of those who profit from your pain. Outthink the system: how Machiavellian intelligence breaks the cycle of dependence. There comes a moment when you realize the system was never designed to reward your loyalty. That your long hours, your devotion, your sweat, all of it, was never building your empire, but someone else's. That's when the ground starts to shift beneath you. That's when the cracks in the illusion appear. And that's when, if you have the courage, you begin to think not just harder, but smarter. Machiavelli's final gift isn't cruelty. It isn't manipulation. It's lucidity. It's the unflinching clarity to see the invisible structure that controls your life and the daring to step outside it. Not with rebellion, but with design, with intelligence, with the strategic vision to play a different game entirely. Because the only true escape from dependence is not to work harder, but to think sharper than the world expects you to. Machiavelli understood something we're rarely taught. Every system depends on your ignorance to survive. Whether it's political power, corporate hierarchy, or even your social circles, the stability of that system hinges on most people staying predictable, emotionally driven, desperate for approval, fearful of rejection, addicted to hard work as a false virtue. But the moment you start asking, who really benefits from this? That's when the system begins to lose its grip. That's when you become dangerous. Because now you're not reacting anymore. You're calculating. You're thinking 3 moves ahead, not 1. And most importantly, you've stopped asking for permission. This is the true Machiavellian intelligence, the ability to navigate a corrupt or indifferent system without becoming corrupted or indifferent yourself. It's the art of appearing to follow the rules while slowly building your own. It's knowing that sometimes, in order to gain influence, you must first appear invisible. That sometimes, in order to strike effectively, you must first wait without resentment. The Machiavellian thinker doesn't panic in discomfort. They observe it. They study the behaviors of others. They collect leverage silently. They don't react to insults, they file them away for later. They don't rush toward the spotlight, they position others in it and control what happens behind the curtain. You begin to see that most people are trapped not by lack of talent, but by emotional dependency. They need to be liked. They need recognition. They need the system to reward them because without it, they feel invisible. But you don't need that anymore. You've started to operate on your own internal compass. You measure success by control, not applause. By time freedom, not praise. By the ability to walk away, not the ability to endure abuse. That's the true reversal. That's the real escape from dependence. Machiavelli would tell you, you don't have to burn the system down. You only have to stop expecting it to save you. Because once you accept that the game is rigged, you become free not to complain, but to adapt. You don't waste time fighting rules you can't change. You begin mastering the terrain. You find allies not through loyalty tests, but through mutual value. You build networks, not friends. You plant seeds that may take years to grow because you're no longer desperate for immediate rewards. You're building for sovereignty, not applause. And that's the final transformation, when you no longer feel guilty for putting your interests first. When you no longer see your time and energy as offerings to a system, but as assets to be invested where the return is leverage, not burnout. You learn that the best moves are quiet, that the most powerful people rarely explain themselves, and that the goal was never to win the system's game, but to play your own. So now the question becomes, will you continue trying to earn your freedom through more effort? Or will you do what Machiavelli advised centuries ago: step back, watch more carefully than anyone else, and start designing your life as if you were the prince, not the servant? It begins the moment you stop obeying by reflex and start questioning by design. The moment you stop asking, "What do I need to do to be chosen?" and start asking, "How do I build something no one can take from me?" The moment you stop trying to look successful and start quietly becoming untouchable. In the end, Machiavelli didn't want you to be ruthless for the sake of cruelty. He wanted you to be awake. Awake to the fact that power, in the deepest sense, is not given. It's taken through clarity, through strategy, through the refusal to play dumb when you were born to play precise. And if you can see through the illusion, if you can let go of the myth that hard work alone will save you, if you can begin to think like a sovereign instead of a slave, then the game changes. Not tomorrow, not when the system is fixed, but now, quietly, immediately. Because you'll no longer be trapped in their machine. You'll be building your own.